How I create collections is probably one of my most asked questions ever. And I've not been reluctant to tell you, it's just really hard to tell you in a social media carousel post or a 7-second reel. Like, it's just, there's too much going on. So I thought I would sit down today and tell you about the whole process. Some designers and artists might wake up one day and just like that, they have a concept. It will come flooding in and it will be like really clear to them. I have had moments like that, specifically with the collection I just dropped. It was a very gut reaction to the way that the world is going right now. But other times a concept will come to me over time. It will be like rumblings, little whispers in my ear, and it will be a much slower pace at getting to me and becoming a realized idea. I suppose you could kind of say it's like a puzzle in a really cliche way. I do start with a random piece and I kind of have to build the picture from there. So for the premise of this video, I thought I would go through my newest collection, which I am still developing behind the scenes. But first I should probably tell you what the concept is for my new collection. So settle in for a synopsis, my lovelies. Here we go. Let me just... A spring thunderstorm, late in March. Flowers and lightning, hope and pain. One destroys, one blossoms. They need each other for survival, and both are hungry. Hunger is the new core collection by Haus Dahlia. It explores the clash of inner child and grown woman. A child full of happiness, love, excitement, and a woman scorned by the world around her. Love stripped away to reveal ugly gashes that can never be healed. Her screams and cries echo across the meadow, but in glimpses, she gets to revisit the childhood wonder. She spots it in the flowers, the bugs, the tree swaying. Yet like a clap of thunder, a flash of lightning, it is gone, and she is left with the ugly again. It's deep, I know. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what that even means, how I translate that idea into garments. Let's talk about the whole thing. It actually starts with a collection that I scrapped back in I want to say January or something like that of this year. I was listening to an audiobook called The Divine Might by Natalie Haynes. And in it, she was talking about, different Greek goddesses. And the first chapter is about the Muses. And the Muses were great, they were interesting, but it was actually the concept at the end of the chapter that really got to me. It was talking about how Sappho, the poet, was considered a 10th muse. This is very debated among historians, and Natalie Haynes propositioned that to say that Sappho is a 10th muse is to downplay her talent and to downplay her skills just because she's a woman. So the idea is that, well, she can't simply be an amazing writer or poet or artist because she's a woman, so therefore she must be a goddess of some kind. And as Natalie Haynes also points out, we never discuss on whether Homer was a deity. And I just loved that idea that Natalie was proposing. And I kind of resonated with it a little bit because when I was showing off my silk dresses, I would get a lot of comments like, oh my God, you look like a goddess. And I was like, no, I don't. I can't handle compliments, please stop. Because I don't feel like a goddess in that sense. I feel like the painter. I became really interested with the relationship between muse and painter, or muse and artist. And so I wanted to do a collection inspired by that because my muses are you guys. You literally run my brand. So that's why I never felt like a goddess, because it was you guys that were the goddesses. Really excited by this concept, and I was like, yeah, I can't wait. I'm gonna look into my own kind of personal muses. One of those people was Audrey Hepburn. And I was like, cool, great starting point. We're looking at the 50s and the 60s and the tail end of the 40s. That's a really great area for garment research. So I started looking and I was doing loads and loads of research, but nothing was really screaming to me. And everything I designed, I was kind of like, and at the same time, I was also having ideas for the autumn collection of next year. So I was a little bit all over the place, and I'm not gonna lie, the autumn and winter collection was exciting me more than what I was trying to create. And this is what I mean when I said that sometimes you get little whispers in your ears about concepts. This was the whisper. So for the hunger concept, it was a rumbling. And so all this time I'm trying to go, oh yeah, Audrey Hepburn. And I have this little voice in the back of my head going, but what about this? So earlier this year, I actually went through another breakdown of a relationship, and this relationship was my mum. Like, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's private, but I've tried several times to mend this relationship and it's just never worked. During this time also, Florence and the Machine had put out a message saying it's been 10 years since our album, How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful. And I was like, damn, 10 years? That album means so much to me, and it just really changed how I view the world. And you know, Florence's music in general is just poetry to me. Like, I'm absolutely obsessed with her, and the way that she writes the female experience is just gut-wrenching. And recently someone asked me how I can take a whole album and turn it into a collection, and really it comes down to visuals. Like, it's not, I can't take all music and turn it into a collection. Albums like that really resonate with me as a designer and an artist in general. It's really easy for me to visualize the world that's being painted for me. And so when I listen to that album, I imagine myself walking through this field and it's like threatening to rain. And I was like, oh, I just love the chaos of her music, the female rage. So back to the collection. I knew I wanted Florence to be my kind of muse for this collection. I started kind of linking all of these feelings to something that therapy taught me, which is having an inner child, having an inner teenager, almost having these inner versions of yourself. So the breakdown of a relationship is my inner child. The album is what I listened to when I was a teenager, so it's bringing up feelings of when I was 16. And it feels like all three of them are battling inside me, wanting attention, wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard. So really, I think this collection, or the concept that's starting to come, at one end you have flowers, the whimsy, the hope, the inner child, and then raining down above you, the betrayal, the loneliness, the rage. And I suppose that's the concept. Very long-winded. It's so hard to explain my thought process in this because it's just like, I can't get you guys to live inside my head. So, and I'm not the best at talking about it. I hope that came across as, you know, articulate as I can make it. So now I have this loose idea, the concept, the feelings. Where do I kind of go from here? Usually garment references is where I go next. So I will have a specific era in mind, which usually comes from the media that I am consuming within that concept. However, with this collection, it was quite different actually, and it has all to do with Pinterest. So usually when I go and search for garment references, I'll go to exhibits, I'll go to archives, but I'll also go to Pinterest. At the moment, I'm trying not to use Pinterest whatsoever. Pinterest is too convenient for me. I have become too reliant on it, and it is killing my creativity. It's just the convenience of it, because it's just so easy for me to sit there and scroll through Pinterest and save what I like. Yes, I do have a clear idea of what I'm looking for when I go into it, and I could argue that I'm using it as a fashion search engine. But the way that I've been using it recently feels like I am just copying vintage dresses. And this isn't for any current collections, but when I was doing the Muses collection, for example, everything I was making, I was kind of like, oh, this has been done before. I'm just like copying this Givenchy vintage dress and just making it more simple. And it was just making me massively overthink everything. I think Pinterest is great, especially for accessibility when you can't go and view vintage fashion in real life, or the exhibits that you want to go and see are not in your hometown. But I can't use it as a designer anymore because I'm not challenging myself with it. So back to this current collection, how am I approaching garment references this time? I actually went back to a technique that I haven't used in ages, something I used to do before I even looked at real life garments, and that is digital collage. So back at uni, I was very much inspired by nature. Like, nature was always kind of my starting point. And one thing I loved to do was take actual flowers, digital versions of them, so pictures of flowers, outline them, and then place them on a model's body and just kind of start to create shapes that way. I was like, God, I haven't done that in ages. I should do that again. So I did with this collection. I actually used a lunar moth, a moth that I absolutely adore. It invokes hope, balance, rebirth, kind of everything that I'm searching for. So I took this moth and I scaled it up, scaled it down, positioned it on my little mannequins on my iPad, and I started to kind of get seam lines and shapes and panels, and I was like, oh, this is going somewhere, I really like this. And then I ended up designing a whole collection just based off of that. And what's great about this is that this is a more original starting point than just going straight into garment references. So what I've created, I can then start to research and go, have we seen this in history before? What else could I look at that's linked to this? So I designed this kind of initial collection, but I had to put it on the back burner for a couple of weeks and focus on other things. So fast forward to a couple of days ago, where creative day, and I was like, I'm gonna focus on one of these designs and I'm gonna develop it. And so I decided to do the silk slip dress. Another thing I didn't mention was when I do go into my collections, I kind of have some vague idea of what garments I want to do. So I knew I wanted to do a silk slip dress, very much like I knew I wanted to do a jacket for the previous collection. But what that silk slip dress will look like, or what that jacket will look like, will depend on where I go. So I was like, okay, I'm doing a silk slip dress, I'm gonna spend a whole day developing it. So before I even, get the calico out, get the old silk out to make samples, I go into my garment research. Now, I filmed this whole day, so I don't want to give away too much. I will post that video in a couple of weeks, but it turned out to be a really good and interesting day. So once I'd done my initial tests and my samples for a design, that's when I go back to the drawing board and I go, okay, this is where my dark placement is definitely gonna go. How's this gonna work? Am I gonna line this section? Am I gonna do something different with the strap? Is it gonna be a thicker strap, a thinner strap? This is where I start to kind of finalize the design. And in this area is when I start to think about practicality. How is it going to be practical for everyday wear? How is someone gonna get it on? How's someone gonna get it off? Are the straps gonna be elasticated, adjustable, all of that? And then from this stage, it's kind of going back and forth between 2D and 3D. So I'll sketch, I'll come back and do some tests and some samples and prototypes and all of that jazz. And then I'll go back and sketch some more until I'm happy with what I've got. And then at the same time, around this point, I'm working on the color palette. And this is what I mean by like, it's a web. Like you're just working on two things at the same time. And then at some point you're like, okay, I've got to connect these now, and then I've got to connect it with the concept that's like over here. And for the color palettes in particular for this collection, this is where I really start to use the concept. So the colors that are invoked by the songs that I'm listening to, the album visuals, like all of that kind of stuff, that starts to inform the color palette. And the idea of a storm in spring is kind of my starting point. So I looked at a lot of blues, silvers, but also golds to kind of like to symbolize the sun coming through even when it's raining, and then you have a rainbow at the end. And then like the rich earthy greens and like moss colors and browns and just really rich earth tones alongside these beautiful blues and silvers. And because I'm 3 years into this, I have 3 major fabric suppliers who I constantly go to. So I already know what my fabrics are going to be for this collection because it's what my 3 suppliers offer. So you'll see across my collections that my fabric choices don't really change. It's just mainly the colors and the design. And my silk supplier has a beautiful array of colors. So I found it so easy to pick out all the colors that I wanted. So as you can see here, I have silks on one side and then I have cottons, which are from a different supplier that I've managed to match up. Like, I still can't believe I managed to match up the colors. Like, it was perfect. But this is the color palette that I'm thinking of for my spring collection. And it is very moody and dark for me. It's spring. Usually I'm very much like, no, spring has to be pink and yellow and baby blues and pastels and greens. I'm just starting to realize now, no, it doesn't actually have to be that. It can be whatever I want. So I know that this color palette is probably not going to resonate with a lot of people. I just think this color palette really helps visualize the concept of this collection and build the world that I'm wanting to do. So I'm being all creative and everything, but I also have to think with my business hat on. So even though I'm trying to prioritize my creativity, the back of my mind is going, okay, but you have to sell these. When I'm doing my 2D to 3D sampling and development, thinking about practicality is when I've got my business hat on, and thinking about color palettes and fabrics that I'm gonna offer and which fabrics are gonna do the best. At the same time, I don't want to risk my artistic integrity. So it's about balancing the two. There are cases where I'm kind of like, oh, this, you know, I'll be selfish and I'll be like, this is only going to sell like 1 or 2, but I just want to make it because I want to prove to myself that I can make something of this level. Take the suspender corset, for example. Like, that's just a very investment piece, but I just really wanted to see that I could really make something like that, and I could. So yeah, it's a very strange design process, but I suppose every artist and designer is different. And I hope that in explaining all of this, I've helped you understand how my process works, even if it is just a massive spider web with me at the center going, how can I make this more complicated for myself? But I hope it gives you a deeper appreciation for my designs and my work, just an appreciation for what true fashion looks like in general. As always, I'm going to mention my arch nemesis, fast fashion. It will just never have the creativity and the depth behind it. It exists in a purely capitalistic echo chamber. Sustainable, ethical, creative, fast fashion could never exist because it's just not in its nature, never been in its nature. The reason why it was created was to profit. We really need to understand that and go back to how fashion is a real art form. So yeah, I hope seeing my processes helps you understand me as a designer, but hopefully the rest of the fashion industry, specifically like, you know, people like Daniel Roseberry, who also go very avant-garde with their concepts and end up creating these absolutely beautiful wearable pieces of art. I hope that me explaining how my process works will help you be curious or make you curious about how other designers work. Yeah.